Welcome to the Dark Zone Adventurism Podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. Episode 125 of the Dark Zone is a flash episode. We literally just got done recording with Team Bones, Roy Malone, James Gallipo, Jen Seger, and Jesse Tubb as they finished Raid Bimbache in Morocco. And this is a flash episode, which means that we're coming to you unedited and raw, and it's a little rough and tumble, but it's a great episode. There are some Wi-Fi burps here and there, but nothing so bad that it takes away from the recording. We appreciate you being a listener. We appreciate Team Bones, who are not that far from the finish of the race. They're sleepy, they're tired, and they get on, and they spend an hour walking us through their entire experience. And I got to tell you, it is some experience. So grab a cup of coffee or get on your bike, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Buckle up and enjoy this episode of The Dark Zone. And remember, if you keep racing, we'll keep talking. Enjoy. All right, flash episode of The Dark Zone Adventurism Podcast is your host, Brian Gatens. Right now, I am speaking with Team Bones. They are in Marrakesh, Morocco, following their 11th place finish. And please correct me, team, if I'm wrong about that. At the Raid Bimbache and 115 hours of racing. This is an interesting podcast because we are Wi-Fi soft and we are no video. So we're going to have to sort of talk very clearly to each other about what we want and what's going on. So Roy, I'm going to kick it to you first. Feel free to jump in. How did the race go for the team? Give us the big overview.
Okay, sure. I'll set the stage. So Raid Bimbache, just for background, is put on by Antonio de la Rosa, who's an old school adventure racer that I actually raced with 20 years ago in the Bull in Africa. And he designed this course very much like an old school kind of Raid Goa eco challenge type race. And, or at least that's what I expected him to. And boy, he didn't disappoint. It was a brutal, what was it? 115 hours. I don't know how many days the next that was, but it was a long race and there were no easy sections. I'll let the rest of the team kind of speak to the color of it because I'm still deep in the recovery mode. But as far as pain and suffering goes, this was an 11 out of 10 for me.
Holy cow, that's big. And you've done a lot of races, right?
Yeah. I mean, this may have been the worst I felt since 07's Worlds in Costa Rica. I mean, it started, and unfortunately, you get 11 months worth of prep and training to prepare for Marrakesh. The race, and the night before the race, your teammates hear you screaming in the bathroom. It's not setting the stage for a good start. And unfortunately, I must have pulled a rookie move somewhere and either had bad water or bad food, and projectile vomited for basically all night.
Wow!
In fact, it was so bad I passed out on a couple of them. And there's something probably in your body that says, hey, if he can't throw out of his mouth, take it out of his nose, because it was coming out of all three holes. I mean, it was just unbelievably bad.
And this is clearly you're going into Antonio puts on these big, huge races. You're going into something big, and right away you're in a bit of a hole to start off with.
A bit of a hole, yeah. I mean, it was such a big hole. That basically, I mean, my teammates carried everything for me the first 2 days. Packs, emotions, everything. So for me, it was just a matter of hanging on and making sure I didn't quit. So,
Brian, what was really funny about this actually is you and I just had this discussion prior to leaving on AR School podcast, and we talked about arriving to these countries and being very careful and not being exploratory. Well, we weren't, and it was a hotel dinner, and Roy had pasta of all things, regular pasta. Shied away from anything fun, and we still ended up in the same boat that we tried to avoid. So it was not planned.
Yeah, and obviously, and going into that, you to that point, you want to get to the start line as best as possible as you could possibly be, right? And all of a sudden, you get hit with something like this, and as a team, and the four of you are very, very experienced adventure racers, you knew right away that Roy was going to need that early race support, and so the team probably fell into that. I would say somewhat easily. You knew that had to be done. How did that impact your? You had a very, very strong finish, so clearly somewhere you turned a corner and you kept moving along. But before I get into that, walk us through the race a bit. It was sound like there was a prologue start in the beginning in a local village. Walk us through how the race unfolded for you in the very beginning.
Yeah, I'll start. So we had a long bus ride to Eight Ben Haddou, which is an ancient city, like a fortified city, and there we had basically like a prologue course where we had to go through the city and get certain checkpoints. You had to follow a route, and there were people who were like human checkpoints along the way. You just didn't know where where they were at exactly along the route, so you had to follow the route and find them. Quite beautiful, busy, full of tourists, very hot. So that got us started.
The cool thing about that area is that it's been the source of, I think, like 14 or 15 movies and major TV shows. They took all of the iconic scenes. You have the Gladiator and Game of Thrones and Persian or whatever.
Ben-Hur was one of them.
Ben-Hur was one of them. So we got a chance to see really all the old, really cool sets around the area before we kicked it off into the big desert.
Yeah, and
so that's a great way to really introduce you. Obviously, Morocco, gorgeous country. An adventure race is going back there after a lot of years not being there. They realized that was to give the racers that sense of the epicness of the scale. They brought you to a beautiful place right away, right, and had you explore it on foot, which is a very common strategy in a lot of these races, right? We did that in the Faroe Islands. We were in Torhaven, ran around that beautiful city to get our feet under us. James, I remember seeing you there during that race, and so that was the same kind of a start. Very hot. Was the heat surprising to you? I know it's Morocco. I know it's hot, but was it warmer than you thought it was going to be, or was it spot on?
Yeah, no, it was hot. It was, exposed open desert from leaving that prologue, and it was into a 40-kilometer trek, about 35 degrees Celsius probably out. So just hot, and we were off on a mix of sort of old roads and a lot of off travel, choose your own terrain to get to the checkpoints. But the first checkpoint we went for turned out to be missing. So we spent a lot of wasted time searching, us and a lot of teens, and that's how we sort of kick things off.
Oh, that's as frustrating as it gets, right? Because right away you're thinking to yourself, it's got to be here somewhere, and you burn all that energy. And I can relate to having that happen previously in other races that we've done. What did you just go on knowing it was missing, or did you have to assume you missed that checkpoint for the beginning of the race?
No, the race director, or actually one of the race staff, was in a van. I don't know, probably a quarter of a kilometer away. And so eventually when you had 14, 15, 16, now 20 teams all looking at the exact same spot, a bunch of, serious legal, really good navigators can't be that wrong. So somebody went up to the van and said, "Hey, we can't find it." He's all, "Oh, they must be missing. Carry on."
Okay. Okay.
I mean,
so yes, that's both good and bad news, right?
You're right. It's frustrating because you don't want it to be precursor for the controls in the rest of the course. Right. You don't. Right. Now you got this doubt in your mind that if you come to where you think the control should be and you don't see it, well, are you really in the right spot, or did it suffer the same fate that the first one did?
Gotcha. And that plays with the head psychologically the entire race. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, it was that first truck was brutal. It was long. It was super hot. And it was really hard. Well, I couldn't eat it all, and it was super hard to get enough water down. And water was sparse out there. I mean, it's just, you got to bring enough, and if you don't, you're going to run out.
So then we made it. It was just mid-evening. No, eight. I'm not sure on the times anymore. It's a bit of a blur, but it was a transition onto the bike from there.
Okay.
And what would be anticipated about 115-kilometer bike. So we built our bikes for the first time. And oddly enough, actually, we wouldn't have to deconstruct them again through the race once they were built.
That's great.
So that was it. Yeah. So that was sort of nice and different. And yeah, I think we were onto the bike. And it ended up being, we calculated out about 155 kilometers.
Okay.
And that was, we didn't make too many nav errors on that at all, but we came out with a lot higher kilometer and time than anticipated.
As did most other teams from them, yeah.
Well, what was the terrain like? Was it road? Was it trail? Were the checkpoints? How hard was the navigation?
It was mostly trail, mostly, I should say, fire road and trail. As you'd imagine in the desert, it's just loose and gravelly. The first biking stage to me wasn't super interesting, but it was steep. I mean, I think the whole course was around 15,000 feet of gain. I'm sorry, 15,000 meters of gain. Sorry. But again, for me, I was just hanging on. So my scope of vision was 6 to 10 feet in front of me.
You were probably just following somebody's wheel, right?
I was following somebody's wheel as best as I could. That's exactly right. I think Jesse, when he gets here, he can speak to navigation, since he was left doing the bulk of it. I typically kind of help out with that. I know James jumped in as well, but for the first 24 hours, I couldn't do much more than just hang on.
How many maps did they give you? Did you get all the maps in the beginning?
We did not. We got them in stages.
Okay.
Which I prefer. I mean, I like that. I mean, I like the fact that you get a map during the course and think tactically when you do that, strategically when you do it. And in walks Jesse.
Yes. So for those who are at home who are listening, so we just watched on another screen, Jesse Tubb was on a cab ride on the way back from the market, and the cab driver was having him stop at various ATMs to get out money because he did not trust that Jesse was going to pay him upon arrival. So it's good that Jesse made it to an ATM and he made it to the call. Jesse, welcome to the podcast.
Good to be here.
Brian was asking about the difficulty of the navigation.
Yeah, the navigation was pretty easy early on, except for when we got into town. There was a little park area that had a mess of trails. I think it was checkpoint 13 and 14 or 12 through 14, and we thought it'd be pretty easy to navigate through. And we actually found a resident right outside the park, and we're like, hey, are the trails down there? And he had no idea that there were trails down there. So that was kind of the first moment of like, maybe this is not what we expected to be. There was such a mess of trails that were not on the map and trails that were on the map that weren't there. It was that night for, I think, most of the teams that got there. It was a big mess.
What were the checkpoints? Were the checkpoints flags? Were they placards? Were they reflective?
Yeah, they're small. It's like the small QOC or orange and white flag, but they were plastic. They were reflective, but they were hidden in behind trees and groves, and you had to be really spot on. And I think luck played more of a role in finding the checkpoints than skill in that for those particular two checkpoints, because there were teams that searched for a long time in there.
How did you find the quality of the maps overall?
Everything else was great. My only complaint about the maps was that the contrast was pretty subtle. So it was hard to see contour lines, and all the maps, except for the Rogaine, was 1 to 50,000. And so it was really hard to see small changes in the contours, especially on the bike. But and even the grid lines were blue. And so sometimes I confused the grid lines for rivers because they were about the same sharpness. It was, but the quality, I mean, they were beautiful. They looked beautiful.
Yeah, I'd heard that they did a nice job on the maps. Or that, but to your point, the coloring and the shading and the hues make it challenging, especially when you get into the race and it's nighttime and you're tired. Everything starts looking a bit the same.
Yep.
So you came to that 150-kilometer bike. Roy, you mentioned that you were struggling. You were following somebody's wheel. You had some difficulty with it, with the navigation at night and all that. And then you transitioned you went from the 40K trek to the 155K bike. What came after that bike?
We were back onto a trek again into the mountain stage, I believe. Yeah, into the mountaineering where sort of last minute gear change had us bringing crampons to Morocco. So I think that we had that notification come out with 1 week ago, but in the High Atlas, they had just a crazy winter and the snowfall was still present. So this like took us up high. Were the crampons necessary? Did it live up to its expectation, or was it just precautionary? No, we needed crampons up there for sure. We were glad we had them. In fact, we had some good stories James can speak to on our little crampon mission when we came through the saddle. Yeah. Well, is that the flying map story, or is that a different story?
That is the flying map story, yes.
So James Gallipo, fill us in on the flying maps. I read about it on Instagram. Tell the audience about the flying map story.
So Roy and I, Jesse was above us, and I'm not sure exactly what happened, but we were probably, I don't know, maybe 50 to 100 meters down lower, coming down in our crampons, and all of a sudden we hear Jesse screaming from above. Hey! So wasn't sure what was happening, but figured out that he had dropped something, and so I'm looking up, kind of into the chute, and I can see this roll of the rest of our maps for the race coming down the mountain in the middle of the chute. We're off on the side of the chute. Basically, the main trail that everyone was on the side of the chute, and these are coming down the middle of the chute, and it is crazy, crazy windy up there, like really, really windy. So I go running across into the middle of the chute, thinking I've got one chance to catch our maps for the rest of the race, basically. And they're flying all over the place. So I'm trying to, position myself as I see them coming, but they're flying all over the place. So at the last second, I just kind of dove and did a spread eagle with my arms and legs as wide as I could, hoping to catch the maps. And then I managed to kind of cradle them and I grabbed them, but then I realized in doing that, I was no longer using my crampons. So I was starting to slide down the mountain without my crampons. So I managed to kind of dig my feet in and arrest myself in time with the maps in hand. But it was pretty nerve-wracking knowing that, we kind of had one crack at this, and then otherwise it'd be a long, long way down to chase those maps.
I have a vision of you. You're like a soccer goalie diving for a penalty kick, right? You got to pick a side and go in that direction. Hopefully the ball goes that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what had happened up above, my left crampon came off my shoe. And so I started sliding down that chute. And the only way I was able to stop myself was by turning on my back and putting all my weight on my backpack. And all the maps were in my outside flap.
Oh, and so
when I stopped myself, it loosened up. And so if it wasn't going to be the maps, it's going to be me going down that chute. So
luckily you sacrificed the maps for yourself.
Yes. I gladly sacrificed my team.
And you sacrificed yourself for that.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
We can see that.
So it's also a pretty good shot to Jesse. If you lost the match, your team might have sacrificed you. Don't forget that. So it worked out just fine at the end. So clearly this is so. And Roy, going back to the beginning of our conversation, you talked about how this was like an epic old school vibe to it. For our listeners who are newer to the sport, what basically distinguishes this race like that? What is it about it that makes it so epic and so like the old raids? Like what was it like? What did Antonio build for everybody?
The thing that I like about kind of the old school racing is that a lot of the old race course designers made courses that had tons of options, right? You weren't prescribed to certain routes, or you didn't have one or two that were evident as the best. but you got big swaths of land where you didn't have private property issues. And so you had and wide open, right? And so you had just a ton of options. And, with the scale of the maps and the kind of lack of clarity in terms of which one each one would bring, you would get into some trouble and you'd have to figure your way out of that trouble. So that's one. And then secondly is the first 4 legs of this course we thought were going to be the crux of the race. They were the long ones. They were the most elevation gain. And we thought, hey, if we could make it for the first 4 in good shape, then we can kind of cruise through the last 5, which were shorter. And that was anything but the case. They just became more technical and harder. And obviously, you're in a fatigue state. So they almost ended up being just as long, and in some cases longer than the original or the earlier stages.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes races kind of peak in the middle, and then you kind of wrap it up on the way home, right? And you're saying that the race was just incessant. It was one after another, and it just got harder and harder.
It did for me, certainly.
Well, and normally on the rules of book or the rules of travel, it'll tell you what the time estimates are, the fast and slow times, and that there was none of that. So we had no idea what the plan besides the altitude and the distance or the elevation gain. And so we made food and water estimates and time estimates for our team based on that information in our past experiences with other races. And it was completely off. And almost every single team experienced the same thing, where it was substantially longer for every leg of the race than we anticipated.
Yeah. So how did you do? How did you do with the food along the way? Obviously, Roy, you were coming in, not feeling well. Some team members were a little under the weather going into the race. How did you do with your food? Did it hold up during the race? Obviously you mentioned, Jess, you didn't bring enough with you during some of the stages. Nutritionally, how do you feel you did?
We stopped at almost every market and bought a Coke and a Fanta. That was a big nutrition, a big nutrition strategy for us.
We didn't come across too many options for like real, good warm food. I think we were all really craving that, like just wanting some good hearty, proper meals.
Give me a burger.
We didn't really come across. Yeah, I don't know if that was a timing thing because we did go through a lot of villages, but that just didn't seem to be something on the table. I know later in the race, packs of Mr. Noodles were coming out and we were making those in an Nalgene and sharing, and that just sort of hit the spot. Everybody was done with the typical sugars and everything else.
For me personally, I wasn't feeling well. I wasn't sick, but nothing. I just did not have an appetite, and I ate maybe 10% of the food that I had on the course. So I really was undernourished. We were short of water often, so it was tough to manage that. But I just could not find anything. Nothing tasted like I would like it normally tastes. Like everything seemed off. Right. So I had a really hard time eating any food.
Yeah, and also you were traveling with a teammate that had significant stomach distress, right? So psychologically, you might be thinking to yourself, the less I eat, the less likely I am going to be ill. And you might not even realize that at the time, right? But if your teammate is sick as a dog, I wouldn't exactly be that hungry either to keep eating along, right? So I could see that playing a role also with that feeling.
Yeah, I also had a good round of throwing up. Right about when, the boys went in to get, only 3 people had to go into a cave and get a checkpoint, which we can speak to, obviously, to do with Roy's head on that one. But they came out to me laying on the ground throwing up. And so that took another, 12 or 18 hours to come around on that. And I'm not really sure where that came from. So I also wasn't eating nearly.
And that you started the race not feeling that way? It hit you during the race?
That came on mid-race. Yeah, okay. Mid-race. And, we just do what we do. We just knew it wasn't going to be the end of me and just took care and eventually worked my way back to getting rehydrated again. And then the food started coming back in again, too. So it was just a process.
Right. It comes and it goes, right? And the trick is you realize it's not a permanent condition, right? You have to just keep staying on top of it as best you can. And eventually, literally your stomach turns in a better direction and you're able to continue. I mean, easier said from my basement in New Jersey, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know the experience.
Yeah.
You've been there.
I've been there.
I I was drawing strength from watching Roy having just suffered. So I was like, oh, if he can get through that.
Yeah. Roy, if you think about it, your illness actually was the best thing that happened to Jen, right? Because it fueled her and carried her along. So good job being a good teammate. Now, in the cave, there was a head wound in the cave, right? Now, what is that story? And first off, before we get there, how cavey was the cave? Were you on your hands and knees? Were you crawling through holes, or was it a show cave?
It was a water-filled cave. So, we were in water up to our, I guess, knees at some point, waist. I think just when you're that tired, you've been beat up for that long, you stop making good decisions. And, it was super hot that day. We were going in a cave. I had my helmet on. I'm thinking, okay, well, let's cool off a little bit. We'll just take the helmet off. Well, who goes into a cave without a helmet and without a light? I mean, it was just stupid. And, so you're walking, you're trudging through the cave, waist deep in water, and you've got a teammate in front of you and a teammate behind you trying to shine some lights on. But the person from behind is casting a shadow with your body, and I just basically shin first into a big old cleaver of a rock and went head down. So I got a big old gash on my shin. Then I stood up and whacked my head. And so, to me, that's just one of those things where things just kind of aggregate. And you think, not only are you tired and making poor decisions, but my God, now you're hurt. And so, what do you do?
But the good news there, Roy, is that with all that happening, your stomach felt much better, because it was the second worst thing happening to you at that point.
It was a secondary. It wasn't a primary issue for me anymore.
So you came out. So I saw the pictures. The head bleeds, but you weren't gashed open, right? I mean, did you need to get stitches?
No, I didn't. I mean, it was one of those things where you get to the TA, because TA was shortly thereafter. And to your point, heads bleed a lot. And so it looked a lot more dramatic than it really was. And they had a EMT type there to kind of help cleanse it and clean the wound. And the EMT said, hey, he needs stitches. And race administration said, well, we've got to have you stitched up before you're allowed to return to the race. I said, well, how long is that going to take? Well, it's going to be 6 to 8 hours before we can get you out to the hospital, and then probably about the same amount to get back.
Oh.
And so that was non-negotiable from our perspective, right?
Yeah, that's a day. That's a whole day you're going to spend doing it.
That's a whole day. Yeah, and we were just going into an orienteering section, the Rogaine, which I that's a really big, important section. You can make a ton of time or lose a ton of time there. So I was able to get out with the help of some staff without having to get that sign off. And the reality was I really didn't need it. I mean, obviously, someone's going to be really protective about being cautious what you do and do need. So anyway, it's fine now. So.
Yeah, and to your point, we like it when race directors are cautious about racer safety, right? We encourage that. We like that. It's good for the sport. And there's a point in time where the racer is able to make the decision about the medical, and obviously you made the good call, right? You knew it wasn't the bleeding probably stopped at that point. It wasn't gushing blood. It was your point was get me kind of wrapped up and get me out of here, because the longer you're in the TA, the more likely they're going to keep you. So you got to get going. Yeah,
that's correct. And if it were hey, let's do a concussion protocol and make sure you're not mentally deranged, that would be one thing. But how many of us have gotten either sutures or butterfly bandages or some other wound care during a race and carried on? I mean, it's just part of the deal.
Yeah, I mean, in Scotland, I got a really good bang up on my leg, and I just wrapped it up with gauze and a lot of ace bandages and ignored it for the next 3 days. Right, yeah. And just when I took it off, I'm like, oh, I hope my leg is still there. It worked out fine. Right, yeah.
Yep, and it gets treated with fun. That's exactly right.
Yeah, all that Scottish rainwater keeps it nice and clean. Okay, so now I'm running through the race here. So now we had the trek through the mountains with the crampons, we had the map adventure. After that trek, did that trek lead into the cave, or was the cave further down the race?
Yeah, the cave was on leg 4. They called the Casbah Mountain bike leg,
Gotcha.
and the caving incident happened. And then we were on to leg 5, which was the really interesting trekking Rogaine section. So this was a big sort of crux and key moment of the event.
And what made it so key?
Well, the interesting thing about it is there were 25, I think, I don't know, there's 24 checkpoints or so, and some of them were 2, some of them were 1. We had to get 20 points out of 26 points.
Okay.
So we spent a lot of time figuring out, okay, what are the checkpoints we have to get? How are we going to do this? What order we're going to get them? And which ones are we going to leave? And Rory and I spent a lot of time really thinking about being intentional about what direction we're going to get. And if you finished a minute after 12 o'clock on Friday, you lost all the points.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, that was a pretty big hit, right? So we knew that we wanted to back end our Rogaine with where all the cluster of checkpoints were. So we went north to where the checkpoints were more spaced out, so that if we had to bail on some of the later options, we would be able to cluster them a little bit better. Luckily, as we're off to the second checkpoint, I think James was like, "Hey, can I just check your math one more time?" Where it was kind of on a longer trek, and so he checked the math, and we had only somehow we'd only figured out that we were going to get 19 points. So luckily, James had caught the mistake, because that would have been, and I think that happened where they got back and realized that they only had 19 points.
And so you had to get at least 20 to get any of the points. You had to get at least 20.
Well, no, so you could get 19 points, but in order to clear that leg, and obviously we were trying to clear the course, and so that was a crucial thing for us to get right.
Got it. Right. Yes, you wanted to clear it. So you wanted to get to 20. Okay. I thought when you first explained it, I thought that if you had to get a minimum of 20 to get any of the points, but no, you could have gotten 5, right? Whatever.
Right.
Okay. Got it.
His point, Brian, was that if you didn't get back to the TA after you leave by a certain time, any of the points you collected were all gone.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's a lot of. And so, how much time did you have for that? Like, I'm assuming that 12 o'clock on Friday, that was the time frame for everybody. So, how much time did you have to get those 20 points?
Maybe 20 hours. I can't remember.
Okay. But you had a fair amount of time to get them. You felt good about the time.
Well, no, because every leg we had underestimated our time estimates on every leg leading up to this, and so 40K of trekking with 1,300 meters of elevation, it doesn't sound that bad. It sounds like, well, you can probably do it pretty easily. It was so steep. I mean, Grand Canyon almost steepness. I mean, really steep hills and trails, rocky, they're off trail travel. It was, we were definitely still like halfway through. Roy's like, I don't know if we're going to clear this.
And this is stage 5, so you guys are pretty toasted by this point. I mean, you're deep into the race now. Okay.
And we're doing, to make it even harder navigationally, we're doing, other than the first 3 checkpoints, everything at night.
Okay.
Yeah.
We only had two checkpoints by dark.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So by then you have to find 8 years. So you roughly say, I'm guessing you had 17 to 18 hours to find 18 checkpoints. Otherwise you lose all those points.
Yeah.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah. So how high was so clearly by this part of the race, you're all a bit toasted. You've had some medical stuff going on. Psychologically, how did you knuckle up and make it through that? Did you talk about the challenges? Did you just put your head down and keep moving? Like, what strategy did you use to get those points?
I think basically, we all knew what our goal was to try and clear this section. So everyone kind of, collectively put our heads down and, did what we needed to do. And we're all in agreement that we're going to try and keep moving as efficiently as we can. One of the big challenges was the terrain was right on the borderline of whether it was like too steep to go up or down. So it was always challenging whether to, I know there was one spot where we decided to go off trail and bushwhack down. And, the first 15, 20 meters was like, are we sure we want to do this? And it was just right on the borderline of do we think this is safe or not? And so it's trying to make those, intelligent decisions, both from a strategy perspective and a safety perspective. But I think, we all realized the challenge that we were taking on and collectively decided, we got to keep moving as efficiently and effectively as we could.
Right. There's two things I want to say about that. There's two things I want you to add on to that. Jen got really tired, and we were side hilling this really steep. I mean, I don't even know how many feet down it was, but it was really steep. It was a small trail, but she was really tired, and the trail was only wide enough for your feet. And one misstep, literally, there's nothing but below us besides the canyon floor.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're going for a ride, if you miss a step.
Yeah. And so we made the call that we're going to stop and sleep for 10, 15 minutes just to make sure that our heads are clear enough that we're not going to make any of those small errors.
Right.
And I think the second thing I'll say to your point is, I think there are certain teams or certain times where having a motivator or cheerleader or someone to like lift the spirits up is essential. My feeling, and I'm curious to hear the other teammates' thoughts on this, we all sort of know what needs to get done. And so I don't think there was ever a need to say, hey, Roy, you got this. You're going to do great, or I feel like we all sort of know what needs to happen in order to push through. And there's an expectation that we're going to do it. So the rally is just...
I totally agree. I think we are individually self-motivated. And honestly, that first section alone, I was on the verge of just saying, hey guys, I just don't think I can do this. And I haven't told these guys this yet, but honestly, if they hadn't grabbed, and it was like, hey, I need help. Unfortunately, that's something I should have said, but it was Jesse or James or Jen picking up anything that I had to make sure that I was unburdened. And the thought of letting them down after 12 hours of carrying my crap around for 12 hours, was enough motivation for me to stay in the game and just, suck it up and get it done. Fortunately, I think that's the kind of mentality all of us have.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of... Go ahead, Brian.
No, please, go ahead. Go.
I was just going to say, just to kind of add to that, I think there's a trust, I think, between all four of us that the person who's struggling, and sometimes it was all of us, but the person who's struggling is doing what they can. And there's just a lot of like little checking in, like, you okay? Do you need anything? And if the person says no, then you know that they're doing the best they can with what they have. If they need something, they're going to tell you, and maybe you're just checking in kind of on a regular basis to see if there's anything you can do to help. But I think there's a trust that, you're going to help you, that you're going to ask, or at least when they ask you, you're not going to lie to them or say, no, I'm fine if you're not.
Well, yeah. And I think that's a byproduct of a couple different factors, right? First things first, on the team, the four of you, there are decades of adventure racing experience, right? So there's decades of experience. There's decades of big race experience. And so the fact that there was so much equality between your four levels of what you can or can't do, you all kind of lived on the same plane, right? So you had nobody brand new with you were bringing along. There was nobody you didn't know bringing along. And so you kind of fall into that ESP that teammates share because they've been together for a long time and they're going through it together. And so I think that's one dynamic. And there was no need for that cheerleader, right, to rah-rah. I also think, too, and this goes to Roy's point about not letting the teammates down, when they unconsciously, instinctually begin to carry your gear, that serves as a motivator to just keep going, right? And that's an important thing for the newer racer listening to the podcast now, is that when you carry each other, you realize that you're carrying the entire team. And people don't always realize that, right? They think you're taking care of one person. If not, no, you're really taking care of all four people. And it sounds like that was the dynamic for quite a while on the team, that all four of you went through that. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and that was really well put. There was various stages during the whole course where one of us was feeling a little low. It's just the nature of where you're racing, I think, and the difficulty of each stage. And we were, unfortunately, with my condition, we put our team pretty far back in the hole. I think we came into the first in 20 22nd or 23rd position, and to, with each stage, make it up little by little and get into, top 10 position. And so we're, pushing hard. And when you push hard, sometimes bad things happen.
So, and so obviously, when we race, we race inside our little 4-person world, right? And we don't really, we see things, we hear things from other teams, but we're really focusing on ourselves. That being said, that being understood, when you were in the TAs, you were on the course. Did you cross paths with other teams? What were the TAs like? Did the TAs serve to energize you, or did they serve to demoralize you? What was your interactions like with other teams?
Yeah, we there was quite a number of teams that we seemed to be around frequently, and it was quite friendly out there. We were with a British team quite a bit, and and because we could all speaking the same language, that helped some conversation. But this had quite a variety of languages being spoken. There are a lot of Spanish teams were here, of course, a lot of French teams, and so that was a lot harder to communicate out there. There wasn't a lot of, I didn't feel like in the transition areas there was a lot of interaction was being given. Like, for the most part, it was just the 4 of us doing our thing, sort of motivating ourselves on. Really, just had to try to keep pressing forward in that regard.
Got it. Right. Yeah. So there weren't a lot of interaction. To your point, there were a lot of non-English speaking teams. So that cuts down on communication. And the fact that the raw nature of the course means that you really don't know, it's not social hour, right? You're moving and you got to get going and we got to get through the TA. And we all know that if you're in a TA for too long, it becomes too attractive to stay there, right? You have to get in and you got to get out. And so clearly you were your own self-combined 4-person unit and you made your way through the course. So after that trekking, first off, that trekking Rogaine, do you remember how much time you had spare at the end of that when you got those 20 points? How close were you to midnight?
I think we're about 3 hours, 2.5 hours.
Okay.
To spare. So we're not close. We're not used to being close to cutoffs, and that might come across as sounding however it sounds, but we were close to 2 cutoffs. One at the peak at checkpoint 22 at the saddle, somewhere where the crampons were, and then this one. And so I think that was an unusual place for us to be in mentally.
And it's also not because we were at the back of the pack, is that so many teams by this point, by like 2 stages in, were already just sort of, short coursing.
Yeah, there's a lot of carnage on the course. That was obvious. A lot of teams got banged around early. Yeah. Okay.
So I think, we were sort of, I think we were in this sort of 8th to 12th place range, sort of in that mix for most of the race. But we were at this facing cutoffs. It was a little unique.
Yeah. If you guys want more of that experience, come race with Dark Zone Podcast, and we'll show you what it means like to chase cutoffs. Okay.
Well, one thing I want to add on to something that you said about the camaraderie with other teams is I think there was a sense that we were all sort of blindsided by the epicness of the course. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that I typically don't experience in the front of the pack with other teams is communication and connection with other navigators. When there's issues, that tends to happen in the mid and the backpack. Right. With this race in particular, there were many times where navigators would get together and talk about, okay, where are we? Where do you think, and so we collaborated because it was some of the navigation was so challenging that there was a sense like we need to get out of this together, which typically doesn't happen at the front of the pack. So I think that was unusual.
And I think that experience is a nod to Roy's point earlier about how this is like the old school raids, right? It's much more you race it and you also survive it, right? And so therefore that survival is so hard that you lean upon other teams, and that speaks to the point that Roy made earlier. So you finish the trekking Rogaine. You have 2.5, 3 hours to spare. Now you're going from I believe we're on stage 6 now. What came next for you?
So then we were on to another mountain bike leg. And
its title was like Mountain Bike Fast.
Yeah.
So we're thinking, I'm really going to fly through this downhill. Yeah, 3 hours maybe.
No.
Well, yeah, because it's 54 kilometers and 900 meters of elevation. That is flat. and fast. So we're thinking, we can easily go 10 miles an hour at this point. So we're thinking 3.5 hours, and it just did not manifest that way at all.
Would that take us 12 hours?
Well, this is the one. They altered this because I'm thinking the wrong one. Is this the one we had to trek for the first 4 kilometers?
No, this is when we left the Rogaine.
Oh.
And but see, Brian's a bit of a blur right now. None of us can remember.
And you got, first off, I'm very impressed with how well you're doing at all this, by the way, because usually I'm drooling at this point. I mean, you just finished, not too long ago, right? So you're doing I'm very proud of you in Dark Zone Central. You're doing a great job answering all these questions. But so this was the mountain bike that you thought was going to be quick, but it ended up not being quick. And so once again, it's your point as made earlier, this was another kind of shot, right? Another poking of you by this race course. Because here you are, 6 stages in, you thought it was going to be fast. It was advertised as such, and it wasn't. So that's kind of hard.
This was the big down the river.
The cool thing about this, one of the parts of this particular mountain bike stage, well, let's back up. So the start stage was a lot of climbing. It was, and it was hot. And it took us a lot longer than we expected. But there was only one checkpoint, I believe, on that stage, and it was a water hole. And tactically, once you got to that water hole, you have multiple options to choose on how you get to the lake from there. And the most logical decision would have been to get back on the trail and go essentially 18 miles of climbing and ridgeline. Before you hit the long downhill to the lake. That was the safest route. And then there was also a section that we looked at that, Jesse was promoting that was basically canyoneering. And we didn't even talk about the canyoneering previously, which was just an absolute nightmare. So we got this PTSD about canyoneering and with our But
so let's back up a little bit there. It sounds like interesting. So what stage was that canyoneering on? Was that in this stage or was that a previous stage?
It was 4.
Yeah.
They had to alter because there were landslides and rain that brought the snow and everything. A bunch of roads were closed. And so they had to alter the course a week before the race. And so they added, they moved the TA3 and they added a bike section. So one of the checkpoints that was a trek was now a bike. There was no indication on the map or from anybody else that it was anything other than a trail. So, okay, that's fine. So we get down this re-entry, we're going, and all of a sudden it turns into a river that has boulders, and it's 14 kilometers of
no trails.
And we were just walking.
And holy cow. So you're walking your bikes down the river.
Yeah. And it's at night, and so we're trying to figure out how far. So we have our bike odometers on their bikes, and so we're pushing our bikes, trying to gauge our distance by our bike odometers. But Jen's odometer is reading different than mine.
And carrying our bikes
at the
time.
And it was 5 hours, 6 hours of just walking, carrying your bike, and pushing through it, and trying to, crossing streams. And the 3 of them all had bike shoes on. I wore tennis shoes the entire time, running shoes. And so I was fine, but they walked 14 kilometers through this mess, their feet wet over rocks and everything for 14 kilometers, which wrecked their feet.
So how certain were you at that point? Now you see a trail and it goes into a river. How certain were you that the river was the right navigational choice? Were you firm on that, or were you just like, this is the only way that we can go?
Yeah. It was the only. So it was going in the correct direction. There was no reentrance that deviated from it, so there was no other option. It was that, and then eventually we were moving quick enough that we started catching other teams. And so then there was a big conga line of probably 5-6 teams that were just going down that. So, again, there's not always safety in numbers,
right?
Navigationally, but there were no options.
Yeah, that was it, right? You were going down river, and there was no choice around that.
And you talked about that trek.
That was 6. The next bike leg, it was like 1.5 miles. It looked similar on the map. But I was like, well, it's only 1.5 kilometers, but it seems so obvious. And at this point, you sort of learn the flavor of the race director, and we're understanding that he is a masochist and that he has a certain devilishness. I don't know. If there's a better word for it. So we know that the hour and a half of trekking isn't going to be easy. There's no possible way that is going to be. It's a trap. Don't go.
Right.
And so we're trying to figure out whether it's going to be worth doing the kilometer and a half canyoneering or the 17 kilometers around.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So there. Luckily, James knows French. He was heading. So we ran into a local, and she assured us that we could actually do the canyoneering, and there's a trail there.
I do like how you said to yourself that this is only going to get harder because this is what the race director is doing to us. So you knew your fate, right? You just knew that it was going to be that difficult, and there was no way around that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that was on stage 4 was the kilometers in the river. Then we did the trekking Rogaine, and then that was with the super sketchy trail. And then we slept for 15 minutes, and we went in the fast mountain bike. Wasn't such a fast mountain bike.
Correct.
Okay. And so when that was done, we then get to stage 7. So what's next?
So stage 7, we descended down on the bikes to the lake. And then this was another Rogaine section, but there had been some course changes when we arrived. They had pulled, I believe, two checkpoints you were no longer able to go to. There was a 10 p.m. hard cutoff, and so there was essentially like four or 6 checkpoints you were allowed to go get. But we were now facing like end of the race cutoff. So that's sort of what we were dealing with, trying to make a new game plan for ourselves here. If we could still get to the finish line before 2 p.m. the following day.
Got it.
Well, and at that point, the first place team had finished, and we'd heard sort of rumors of how long it had taken them to do the last 2 stages. They had finished a day ahead of the second place team, I think, or the next place team.
Yeah, they had a big gap at the finish. Yeah,
and so we knew that. Again, the flavor of the course designer that the next 2 sections were not going to be handy, easy. And so we had to figure out like how many checkpoints are we going to get here to ensure that we're not going to finish late. And
the other issue we were told, which I think came into our decision making, was that the wind was supposed to pick up. We got there late in the afternoon. And one of the things we hadn't talked about yet is how vicious Moroccan winds are.
Just relentless.
They are, I think you called them angry or vicious or something.
They're angry gusts. I've never experienced, I've been in strong, steady gusts before that were probably 50 kilometers or 60 kilometers. This was out of nowhere. It would yell at you for like 3 seconds, and literally it was pushing us off our bikes. We passed somebody a local who was pushed off his donkey down the cliff.
Oh my God.
I think he was okay. But I mean, and literally the wind was pushing us up the hills too on these roads. It was insane.
So if one of those squalls came and hit us on the river or on the lake, there's no way you're paddling back.
Right.
You can get out there, but you're not coming back. So at this point we were full course. Obviously that was our objective, is to finish the full course, but based upon kind of what the leaders had taken to complete it from there, and the prospect of getting blown out to sea, if you will, right. We made the strategic decision, I guess, to just go grab one checkpoint. We'd already changed by the time we heard all this information, so we got one checkpoint, and what was it, 115 total hours of racing? We had a total of 30 minutes of paddling.
Well, yeah, I mean, the paddling Moroccan thing didn't feel like it was going to really come along big, but you still had you had your dry suits and all your paddles with you, right? So for all that, you had a half an hour of paddling in you.
Yeah. All our seats, our paddles, all of our PFDs, all our gear. But for that half hour, it was bliss.
Yeah, it was great. It was perfect.
We were able to rest our feet. It was. Yeah.
And I'm assuming by this point in the race, you're turning for the finish, right? You're really, really like this is, you could sniff the finish line, right? And so And was this what was the final stage? Was this the second to last stage, the lake, and then it went into the final stage, or was it more after that?
There was two more stages after that.
Okay.
We had another long mountain bike ride before we got to the final.
And how did that now? Yeah, Jen.
Like, had we stayed on the kayak and given ourselves, 1 hour out there and collected a few more checkpoints, I believe that would have been the difference of us finishing still on time and maybe in 9th position. Okay. I believe we had just collected 2 more and given ourselves 40 more minutes out there. So, you can only make decisions at the time with what information you have.
Right. And once again, to your point, you played it conservative and it worked out the way it worked out. If you were daring, you could have gotten really, really hosed, right? You would have had a really big problem out there, stuck behind the wind. Who knows what's going to happen? So to your point, you made a judgment call based upon what you knew at the time, and you made the best call you could.
Yeah, it would have been a DNF.
Yeah. Which would have been, I mean, you would have begged for a stomach virus as opposed to a DNF. A DNF would just be the worst.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right.
And the lack of slow and fast time estimates really played into, we were traveling a little bit blind, so rumor was king at that point, I guess, in terms of making decisions, because we really had nothing to go on. And all we knew is that every estimate we had made up to that point in the race was slower than what was.
Right. So you knew you had a feeling the way it could have bounced in a different direction for the team, and at that point, to have a DNF or have a massive issue out there would just be so killer, right? It would just hurt so much because you're well over you're top of my head, you're around over 90 hours of racing at this point, if not more. It feels like, right? And so
Correct.
You're thinking to yourself, like we're looking at the finish line here. We got to play smart. This isn't the time to be dumb. It's too late in the race.
Right.
Well, with all the things that had happened up to that point, with people getting sick and injuries and things that we had experienced, I think that played into us being cautious. But also, to James's point about the rumor mill, we were hearing vastly different stories about time estimates of how long it was taking teams to finish sections, the last 2 legs. And so we just need to play it safe. And I still think we did the right thing, given where we were and what we knew.
Yeah, I hear, and obviously, hindsight is 20/20, and great call on the team's part, right? Because you're sitting here talking about a finish as opposed to talking about a DNF, right? And that's what matters.
Yeah.
So how was that? So how was that mountain bike? So after you had a mountain bike. Was that pretty standard by this point? Were you just a machine plugging away, getting in the finish, or was that mountain bike? Did it get exciting for you?
It was navigationally. It was actually pretty tricky. There were a couple spots where I overshot the turn. Luckily, I caught it quickly, but I was starting to feel really tired. We had to stop for a minute nap at one point because I could not. I was asking my teammates to tell me stories that they told me like 6 times just to hear a story.
Just keep engaged. So for the 115 hours of racing, have you added up your sleep totals for the 115 hours? Have you done that yet?
Yeah.
7?
8, I think we came to.
8 hours? 8 hours and 115?
8 hours. Okay. Yeah. And we went through Monday, 4, 5. We only went through five nights. 5 nights of racing.
Okay. 8 hours. Okay. And that's expedition level racing sleep, right? That's just what happens. And so do you think I'll get to this question when we're near the finish. So after the mountain bike, then you went, and what was the final stage? You remember?
No, just one last dance.
Yeah. So this gets back to your earlier question about, or I guess our earlier point about looking at the sections before the race starts and figuring, okay, how much food are we going to need? What kind of equipment are we going to need? And the title is The Last Trekking, right? And it's 9K. So we're thinking, okay, well, it's a part trek. We're wrapping up. It's running down the finish line. There may be a little bit of rappel they talked about rappelling off a bridge, so a little fun there. And we did. We started off rappelling off a bridge down into what we were told was going to be anywhere from ankle to knee deep water for the full trek in the canyon to the finish line. And went up to our necks and started swimming. And basically, Brian, I can't recall whether you were at Fiji or not, but it reminded me a lot of that Fiji river swim.
Okay.
For 9. So we were in mostly and out some of the time of the water, but basically you're crawling over massive boulders, you're moving at a snail's pace. We hit this at 3 a.m., I think. And so, for the first 6 hours of it, we were doing it in darkness.
And we were doing it in our bike shoes.
Oh, yeah. That's
it was one of those shoe mix-ups somehow, and our running shoes with his leg ended up in the bike box, which we didn't see again.
Oh, you poor people. 3 of
bike shoes to finish this section.
Well, I'm laughing because I could see me being in that team bag. 9K, it's nothing. 9K, it's easy. Right. We'll be done in no time. Don't bring any food.
Right. Yep. Yeah. We had brought such little food that we were hoarding every scrap of calorie. The issue was that we didn't eat much. I mean, I don't think I ate more than a third of your cup ramen.
Yeah.
Right.
At that point, it was just survive and get to the finish line.
So the race, it feels like the race finishes with like a punch in the face, right? That's like, it's like we're almost done here.
It was,
It was a beautiful canyon, and we were in there as the sun came up, and you look around these huge walls, and I mean, I thought it was pretty stunning, pretty cool leg, but you're ready to be done, and when you're moving so slow because you just can't move faster yet, as slow as we felt we were moving, we caught up to teams in there, so nobody passed us, and we came upon I think 3 teams,
right?
Which
they were just crawling.
Yeah, and it also one of those teams was one right in our neck of the woods for a final placement, and we beat them in that last 30 minutes to finish.
Great. That's a great feeling. That's really nice. It's good for all that hard work and effort and all those decisions you make. It's always nice to catch somebody, to have that competitive fire be rewarded near the end of the race is always a nice feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And then go ahead.
Yeah, so we had brought dry suits where they had said to bring wetsuits originally in the race instructions. So we asked if we could bring dry suits for the canyoning, and they said that was fine. So we were in dry suits, and we were mostly happy to be in our dry suits, except for that they kind of turned into wetsuits a little bit. So one funny anecdote was maybe, I don't know, less than a half hour in probably. After going through I think it was probably our first swim section, Roy was hanging back a little bit, and he said, guys, can you hang on a second? So he walked up on shore, and you could see that his dry suit was filled up to the knees in water, like full. He's trying to walk.
Had a busted gasket evidently.
Yeah, busted gasket. He said, you think we can cut some holes in the booties of these things? So we pulled out the emergency knife and cut the feet out of his dry suit.
So the water can basically drain out the bottom of the dry suit.
Exactly. Yeah.
It sounds like that dry suit might be staying behind.
It's going to have some major repair required. Yeah.
Yeah. My dry suit got wet as well. I'm not sure why, but it took on a little bit of water, but nothing close to that.
And by that point in the race, you must be shaking your heads. Like, this is, of course this happens, right? And you just keep moving. Like, at this point, nothing would surprise you.
Well, and this goes to a general rule of thumb that I try to apply to every race is don't ever trust the volunteers. Because they say, it's only a mile down the river or it's whatever. They told us, like where I said it, it's going to be shin or knee deep water. So I left the gasket to my dry suit open in the front because I was worried about overheating. Not 10 feet into it, I'm down to my neck and my dry suit's filling with water. So anyway, there was a bunch of misinformation that we were getting from and well-intentioned people, I'm sure. Like, it's not. It's not.
They hadn't scattered in that area.
I've been a volunteer. Volunteers have helped me out. Rarely is the accuracy 100%. Right. It's always various degrees how far away from that they are. But thank you, volunteers. You're out there. We appreciate you. Keep giving that advice. But everyone just close your dry suits. So here you are now. So now you crawl down the river, you go through the canyoneering, and now I'm assuming you come off the banks and you come in through the finish. And I saw the finish, I saw the video, and you looked like you had every ounce of your 115 hours out there. How did it feel coming across that finish line?
I don't know how to take that comment.
Oh, I do. And you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, we didn't just come out from the river to the checkpoint. We climbed and climbed up to the finish line, I should say. But I can tell you that, seeing the finish line, we all agree this is probably one of the, if not the most amazing finish lines of any race we've ever done. I forget the name of the waterfall, was the beautiful.
What was the name of the waterfall?
Uzad waterfall. Say that.
Thank you, Kara.
Yeah. Anyways, absolutely stunning location for a finish. After giving every ounce on the course, it was a fitting end to have that kind of a reward.
We didn't just stroll across the finish line.
No, that's true. Yeah.
There was a rope section about 1.5 kilometers down, getting off the river, and we barely made it to the ropes, just in front of 2 other teams. One of which was the team that I think, from a placing standpoint, was either right in front of us. Yeah, it was right in front of us or right behind us. And so once we got off that ropes course, knowing that they were behind us, after 115 hours of racing, it was a sprint finish.
Yeah, you were hustling. Yeah, you don't want to get caught then.
Uphill sprint finish to a finish line, right? Gotta love it.
Yeah, and to your point, the pictures are just amazing. What a beautiful place to finish a race after such a monumental effort. I mean, it must have felt, coming up to that finish line must have been a combination of elation and relief and emotions you haven't even begun to name yet. I assume that's how it felt for you.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think we're still processing,
right?
And going back and looking at, kind of how things went and how we dealt with them. And, but I think it's certainly a nice way to finish.
So let me ask you, as we wrap up here, because I know it's getting late there and you're tired, and we're going over an hour here, and you've been very generous with your time. So thank you, Team Bones, for doing this. Curious, with 115 hours of racing, how close to the cutoff were you to not make it?
We finished about 9:25, 9:30 Saturday morning, and the cutoff was 2. So, yeah, we had 4.5 hours.
4.5 hours. Which 4.5 hours could have been, that could have been eaten up really easily on the course. 4.5 hours is not a lot of time.
For sure. That's right.
Especially if you had to go get stitches for your head. Right?
Yeah, right.
Or if you're stuck on a paddle, right? The winds push you back, or if a bike breaks down, like 4.5 hours is the blink of an eye in a race of this magnitude. So congratulations, Team Bones. So before I let you go, and this has been, you're very gracious with your time, and I know you're processing and you're fighting sleep and all of that, but I want to give the final word to any of the 4 of you, or all four of you. What do you want to leave the listeners with? Flash podcasts are very popular, one of our most listened to types of podcasts. People love this when this happens fresh from a race course. What do you want to leave the listener with about your experience in Morocco?
I'll say this is probably one of the most beautiful, amazing courses in terms of a big epic race. It had that real kind of grand feel to it for me. And I really appreciate that. And combining that with the culture, the people were incredible, so friendly everywhere, and kids wanting to high five everywhere, went through little towns. So for me, it was an amazing experience to race in this country. And I would definitely love to come back.
Mm-hmm. I think, one thing I'm thinking a lot about is just, the takeaways from it when you come with expectations and it doesn't go the way you thought, but that's what racing is, especially adventure racing. And there's so many things that are completely out of your control, but it's what you make of that experience. And this was fantastic with these 4 awesome humans who are so strong, and we got to just really hone in on teamwork. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm going to remember out there is us 4. Some of the stuff becomes really funny, down the road. It's maybe not funny at the moment, but it creates great memories of our time here. So a super positive one, even despite everything, it's been great.
I'll say that this is my favorite form of travel, because whenever I do travel itineraries or plan a trip somewhere, I'm very unimaginative. And even if I try to Google, what are the coolest spots to go somewhere, the great thing about traveling or seeing countries in this manner, where you're trekking and you're living off of the land, like you're traveling on the land, you're not in a car, you're not you're interacting with the locals and the environment in a way that you don't in a car, that it makes the experience so much richer. That I think this is the best form of travel possible, because we saw parts of Morocco that there's no way I ever would have seen or experienced if we had not done this race. And it really, I don't know, not to get too metaphysical here, but I mean, it really makes you realize how connected we are and how wonderful people are when you can actually interact with them and engage with them.
I'll wrap it up, Brian, by just saying, I know you talk about this a lot on your podcast, but the importance of choosing who you journey with is so important. A lot of what drives me with each race is you're spending 4 or 5 days out there breaking yourself down and beating yourself up, both mentally and physically. And then you get a chance to be with people to build you up better. And that's what we certainly had with this team. I certainly had with this team, to have gone through the lows of this race with such incredible people, incredible humans. I won't forget it anytime soon. And I've been doing this many years, and this is one of the races that I'll certainly remember high on the list, despite the agony, the pain and suffering that I'm still struggling with at the moment. So anyway, that's what I'll take away from this race.